9/11 is today. We're going to talk to a young woman who has not been on this program before. She has done an extraordinary amount of research, however, and I assume she's standing by there. Rebecca, are you there?
I am, yes, I am.
Where are you? You don't have to tell me the town. What state are you in? What part of the country?
I'm in the western part of the United States.
Good.
Right now.
That narrowed it right down. I like that. All right. Rebecca Roth is our guest, and I've subtitled it 9/11 Whodunit. Rebecca has done some extraordinary work, and I want her just to kind of jump into that, and we'll follow along and chime in here and there and ask her to amplify and further elucidate on things. But what got you pulled into this?
I stopped flying in about 2004, and
you
I
were
really
a hostess.
Yes, I was. I was an international purser and a flight attendant for about 30 years at the time of 9/11.
Wow.
I flew until about 2004, and then I never really looked back at the airline or 9/11 or anything else. I saw it unfold on television just like everyone else did.
Yeah.
And in 2008, 9, somewhere in there, in my retirement, I thought, well, I'll just write that novel everyone I flew with told me I should write. So I started to write a novel just about life in the jet stream and what it was like to do what I did for a living. And I traveled and I saw lots of great places, met lots of neat people all around the world. I thought, well, this would be really kind of fun to base a novel on. And then about, I don't know, chapter 2 or 3 into my novel, I decided I'd introduce a Middle Eastern character, and I wanted to grab a name. So I Google searched 19 Arab hijackers from 9/11. And lo and behold, up in front of me came a BBC article written September 23rd, 2001. How did I miss this? 6 of the hijackers were still alive. At least 4 of them were professional airline pilots out of the Middle East. And I was just absolutely shocked because
aren't there more still alive? I think
there's actually 10.
10, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That I can see how that knocked you over, sure.
It sure did. And I was so shocked. And then I read a little bit about these, hijackers still alive. I started Googling and started looking, and then I started discovering other things. I set that novel aside and did thousands of hours of research into 9/11 because I have to honestly tell you, even though I never looked back and I couldn't really go there mentally.
Right.
I knew from day one that cell phone calls cannot be made from altitude. And when I started hearing that, and I started hearing that the flight attendants themselves were making cell phone calls, reservations and different family, I knew that was wrong. It's not protocol.
Yeah.
And it can't happen. And then I saw and heard so many things that were wrong that I just put my brain on don't go there. Look, I'm not going to go there. Because I flew for a few years after that. And listen, when you're flying, your safety net is NORAD and the U.S. military. And I've had jets scrambled for me before for different incidences over my career. And they come to your wingtips, and it's very frightening because sometimes you can see their armament hanging from them. And they'll maybe shoot you down. You just don't know. But the feeling is horrible, except they do scramble and come to your rescue in 6 minutes. On that day, it took almost 2 hours. And after 9/11,
something wrong there. Yeah.
I was like, well, my first question was, when somebody called me and said, turn your television on right now, and I'd just gotten home from Europe, and I'd come in as purser, so I hadn't seen any FAA warnings about hijackers or anything, or Al-Qaeda, and we'd never been told about Osama bin Laden.
Osman, yes.
Or I later on found out he was a CIA asset in the mid-'80s. To start up the Mujahideen for the CIA. And so I didn't know about him or Osama bin Laden or Al-Qaeda. They had never told us or warned us that this could be possible, a hijacking group. And I was so shocked. I saw that second plane go into the South Tower like a hot knife through butter. And honestly, I thought it was either trick photography or a new rendition of War of the Worlds.
Wow.
I thought it was somebody was joking because planes cannot disappear into a steel building. They're made of aluminum. And if you've ever seen an aircraft that's been in a real major hailstorm or hit by a large bird, they do a lot of damage. Those planes are very fragile. I've seen them take a bird strike and a lightning strike and see what happens. So I really thought it was some kind of trick photography, and I had jet lag and I didn't know what was going on. And the person on the other end of the phone was saying, "It's terrorists." And I'm like, well, later on that day, I said, well, how did they get control of NORAD? How did they control our military? That was my main question, is so how could somebody on the laptop and a satellite phone stop NORAD from scrambling? And
how many hours?
Well, they were an hour and 45 minutes, I believe.
My goodness.
Close to New York.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting what happened.
Well, then we get the story about, who was it? Leon Panetta? I can't remember now. About Dick Cheney being told.
Yeah, that was Norman Mineta.
Norman Mineta, not Leon Panetta.
Yeah. See, with things kind of like they could be a part of the same song. He was actually in the bunker with Vice President Dick Cheney, because a young soldier would come in and say to the Vice President, the aircraft is 20 miles out, sir.
He'd give him mileage checks. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he said the airplane is 5 miles out, sir. Do your orders still stand? And Norman Mineta, he's on record saying this. I believe he said it at the 9/11 Commission hearings, I think. And, or before that. I don't know. He's certainly on record just saying that. It's very well known. And Dick Cheney said, have my orders still stand? Have I changed? No, my orders still stand, as if he knew what was about to happen. And shortly thereafter, just a moment, something hit the Pentagon. And so what I found in looking for my second book, because I've just released the second book, Methodical Deception, is I followed up with people like Norman Mineta. And
very good.
From the FAA.
Yeah.
And I know I'm going to send you these books as soon as, I want to send you hardbacks, and I think they'll come in on Wednesday for the new book.
I appreciate that. The first book is, Methodical Illusion. And the second book is?
Methodical Deception.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah. And so what I did was I followed up with people that I think should have lost their jobs that day and found where they went and where they're sitting on, what board of directors they're sitting on.
Yeah. They got rewarded. They got, the big prize. Yeah.
Yeah. Really big prize. And it's interesting talking about Norman Mineta. If you listen to the official story of 9/11.
Boy, you're right. A rapper would love those two guys in a song.
They would. And if you listen to the official story, they claim there was a gun on board. There was bombs on some of the aircraft, knives and box cutters, and pepper spray and mace. Those were all illegal to bring on board an aircraft at the time of 9/11. And so you have to look at who was running security. And these are the things that I looked at in every single detail on 9/11.
Well, unfortunately, we know now who was. So tell us who was running the security.
Yeah, this is very interesting. There was a company started out of Israel called ICTS International, and they had a subsidiary in the United States called Huntley USA. And I remember seeing ICTS and Huntley USA almost everywhere I went. Because that was before.
Really? So they penetrated the entire aeronautical business industry and got into practically every airport.
Exactly. But what's really weird is the company ICTS was started by an Israeli convict who had been convicted of making fraudulent documents, campaign finance problems, and 2 or 3 other things. He actually was in prison. And so he gave the company control to somebody else in Israel, and they brought that company to the United States as Huntley USA. And for some reason, United and American both signed up with them. They controlled almost all of their security, and almost every other airport in the United States did. But what's really weird, Huntley or ICTS International runs security all over the EU. They ran security when Richard Reed, the tennis shoe bomber, came through Charles de Gaulle.
Yeah.
They ran security also through Amsterdam Schiphol Airport when the panty bomber that almost took Northwest Airlines down going into Detroit on a Christmas morning. They ran that security. They ran security at Boston Logan, Dulles International in Washington, D.C., and Newark on 9/11. So you think, now how did they get bombs and knives and all of that stuff through? So at 3 airports, now we know of 5 actually, where supposed terrorists with bombs had allowed through Huntley. Guess who's sitting on their board of directors right now? The Secretary of Transportation, Norman Mineta.
Oh, no.
Think about this. In reality, they failed to stop the shoe bomber, the underwear bomber, and everything that happened on 9/11. But one thing I did discover is there were not 19 Arabs on the real passenger manifest. That's a story that's generated just by the FBI as part of the cover-up of what really did take place.
Wow, Rebecca. Wow. What a journey you've been on. What you have seen, you know too much. It's in your books. I'm very happy about that. I hope that they do very well. It's time that we get the truth of this out. The words, the terms, inside job, really don't even come close to the dynamics involved in this tragedy. It was huge. We were sold out by our own. Well, you tell us.
Well, that's true. And what happened to me was I immediately, once I started to see the hijackers were alive, I found an FBI document was a transcript of the 2 flight attendants from Flight 11. They were the first 2 people to call and to contact anyone that they were being hijacked or something was wrong. So it was very fortunate because I just put my flight attendant shoes back on and said, okay, I'm going in there with them. And I listened to every word. And Betty Ong called reservations, which is a line no flight attendant would call because you're on hold just like you guys are, just like passengers, 10, 15 minutes on hold. And if you're calling in a real emergency like a hijacking, you can't be on the phone for a long period of time because if a real hijacker saw you on the phone, they'd probably kill you. So that was not part of the protocol, was to make phone calls outside. But we had 2 flight attendants that did that. One used a cell phone and one used an onboard phone. And Betty Ong called reservations and she said, one hijacker, as a he, has sprayed pepper spray or mace in business class and we can't breathe in business class. And I read that again and I thought, wait a minute. Now, what went through my 30 years career in my mind? Leaving Honolulu with that cheap perfume, that flowery stuff they'd spraying and the whole airplane would fill up with it. Somebody sprayed it, everybody smelled like puka flowers or something. Or dropping duty-free rum somewhere in the airplane, everyone would smell it. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, if this airplane were pressurized at altitude and someone sprayed something as bad as pepper spray or mace, both of which are not legal.
Go through the whole plane.
Including the hijackers, would be suffering from it. And yet both of those flight attendants were on the phone for 27 minutes. Neither of them ever coughed, choked, gagged, or said, my eyes are killing me. I can't breathe. I'm having trouble. They didn't. You see what they said? There was gas only up in one section. And they talked on the phone for nearly a half an hour. And so she said something else. She said he stood upstairs. And now, to somebody else, that means nothing. But I know there are only stairs on a 747. She was on a 767.
No stairs.
Since they were not pressurized and she was calling, they were on the ground somewhere in a hangar. And there are stairs in every corner of a hangar. And so what I did was I thought, well, then 20 minutes from Boston, let me find where they could be. And I knew that those aircraft, because they were heavy, we landed where they were full of fuel to go from coast to coast. Even though the loads were light, they're still landing what we call heavy in the industry. They needed at least a 10,000-foot runway, and lo and behold, if I didn't find a reserve Air Force base, within 18 minutes of Boston. And
perfect.
4 aircraft were taken over remotely using the flight termination system, which was sold to the airlines, to Boeing first from a company called SPC Corporation.
Another Israeli company.
Interestingly enough, not only that, the CEO of that company was Rabbi Dov Zakheim, who was also the comptroller of the Pentagon.
Dov Zakheim, who on September the 10th announced that there was, $2 trillion missing from the Pentagon budget?
Yep, he was the banker. He was the comptroller there. He was also the CEO of SPC Corporation.
Unbelievable.
They also have a subsidiary company at SPC called Tridata. And after the 1993 bombing that the FBI did of
Yes.
the World Trade Center. Tridata got most of the reconstruction and got the blueprints for the towers.